Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Craig Vanderswag, and on behalf of Fire Chief Warren Jones, it's my pleasure to bring you this evening the Central Liberty County Consolidated Fire Protection and Emergency Services District 2019 budget. This budget serves as a financial roadmap for the CLCFD and has been prepared in accordance with Colorado statute and Colorado code. The budget also follows best practice guidelines recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association. And in keeping consistent with the shared mission of all members of this great organization, this budget has been prepared with the priorities and resources necessary to accomplish our current goals and future goals, all the while meeting previously established obligations. The citizens of Central Liberty County, those that work here, those that travel here, those that live here, can rest assured that the CLCFD is prepared to meet current and future emergency service needs. The CLCFD has reorganized its response resources so that all areas of the county are served without delay. The CLCFD is committed to providing the highest quality service to its community, and with that in mind, the CLCFD will be implementing new performance measures to direct future needs and ensure organizational accountability in the future. It is my honor to represent the women and men of this fine organization, and we strive to continually improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our organization and enhance the service delivery to the communities that we serve. And with that, I'd like to present to you our 2019 budget. Before we begin this evening, all of the information in this presentation should be in front of you in the board letter that was submitted and will be available in the budget document that will be published to the general public. So one of the mandates that came from your board was to identify and develop a budget process. How are we going to do the budget for the Central Liberty County Fire Protection District? So what we've come up with is this fairly ominous looking flowchart, and it should be in your documents in front of you. But if you please turn to the page that describes the budget process and find this sort of cumbersome looking chart, I'd like to take you through that chart and show you that our budget process that we're recommending is a year-round process that's cyclical. It's a process that identifies needs, and it's a process that continually evaluates the performance of the budget. So let's start, if we will, in the upper left-hand corner. And that's where we're going to enter the cycle. As I said, our budget is cyclical, it's year-round. It's busier during some parts of the year than others. But we're going to enter this process in the upper left-hand corner, and it starts with our managers, our executive staff, our chief officers, identifying what the needs are going to be for the upcoming budget year. They're going to evaluate performance measures, evaluate staffing levels, evaluate capital needs, evaluate ongoing maintenance and equipment needs, and evaluate training needs, and identify where their requests for budget allocations are going to be for the next fiscal year. So once those areas are identified and our managers sort of make their case, that is internally reviewed with the deputy fire chief and fiscal manager in the department. Once those reviews are completed, we look at revenue estimates to see if we can accomplish those goals. Obviously, we can't dream big and build 10 fire stations if we don't have revenue to support that. So we look at what our needs are going to be, or our requests are going to be, and do we have the revenue to support those requests? And that's done by the deputy fire chief and our fiscal management team. So we look at the revenue, we look at the district budget, we look at any fund balances, and we look at the 5-year forecasts for the district. In the upper right-hand corner is the first review from the fire chief. So once our managers have identified their needs, reviewed that with deputy fire chief, reviewed that with fiscal, identified revenue on basically how to pay for these items, the fire chief reviews the budget. Once the fire chief reviews the budget, we look at any changes that we need to make to the organization. We look at any service level impacts these budget requests might have. And then we take that information and we move over and we begin to work with the cities. And we had internal reviews with the cities and their budget analysts. We review those budgets with the city managers. And then once those reviews are completed, we start to generate the budget document. We'll start to build charts, we'll start to build graphs, and we'll start to have an internal budget book to work from going forward. From that document, we have a recommended budget for the fire department. City manager reviews that, the auditor controller reviews that, and then we conduct district budget workshops. And on our flow chart, we're on the far right-hand side, third box down. So once we have a good idea of what our needs are going to be, there's been some internal review, there's been some external review, we begin to have budget workshops with your board to sort of essentially talk about what the needs of the fire department are going to be. We get input from your board, we make any final adjustments, and then we have board hearings, a meeting such as tonight, where the budget will be reviewed, heard in open forum, and hopefully adopted. Once that budget is adopted, we'll spend some dough. We'll implement the budget, we'll fund the fire department, we'll fund emergency services for Central Liberty County. We'll generate any purchase orders and make purchases, we'll distribute any items that we've received. Any payment claims will be sent to the auditor controller to be paid and reviewed. And then what occurs during the rest of the year is ongoing budget monitoring, generating reports, analyzing trends, and then making any budget revisions based on unanticipated revenues or expenditures. And we'll do that year round. And then at the beginning of the fiscal year again, or in preparation for a new fiscal year, we will have our managers again identify any requested needs that they might have. So we've wound all the way back up to the upper left-hand corner. So now that we've talked about our budget cycle and the process by which we're going to fund the Fire Protection District, I'd like to take a second and talk about what we do, what services we provide. Central Liberty County Fire Protection and Emergency Services District provides structure fire suppression, wildland firefighting, advanced life support emergency medical services, public education, hazardous materials response, technical rescue response, and other areas of public service, whether it's helping somebody with a broken water line, helping somebody into their car, getting a cat out of a tree. Basically, any request for service, we want to be there. We want to help. We want to provide the highest level of service to the members of Lizardhead City and Liberty County, not just the residents, anybody who visits here, drives through here, works here, shops here. We want to provide the highest level of emergency response services anywhere. So how do we do that? 3 fire stations, 11 fire engines, 2 ambulances, 41 firefighters, 9 paramedics on the front lines, and to oversee that operation, 1 assistant chief, 1 fire chief, 1 fire marshal, and administrative support staff to help make sure we stay on track. A little bit about EMS, or emergency medical services. We provide direct 24/7 medical emergency response to 911 calls for assistance. The ambulance service we provide is staffed with 1 paramedic firefighter and 1 emergency medical technician firefighter for each shift. The EMS section responded to a total of 980 patient transport calls for assistance last year and provides mutual aid and non-emergency interfacility transport throughout the jurisdiction. We're the safety net. We provide high quality, highly efficient emergency medical services to the people that live, work, drive through here, and visit Central Liberty County. A little bit more about our operation. Each shift, 1 company officer, 1 engineer, 1 firefighter at each of the 3 stations. We provide fire protection services or fire prevention services to include walkthroughs of commercial and public buildings, pre-plan information, and providing community relations and community support through education, safety talks, and CPR classes. Part of our goal also is to provide all of those things in a fiscally responsible and prudent fashion. We believe, obviously, that public safety is an essential service and deserves top priority for funding, but that money has to come from somewhere. The revenues received by the CLCFD consist of funds secured through a property tax levy of 11.75 mils approved by the electors, an existing 1.2 mils bond levy on property within the old Lizardhead Rural Fire Protection District, 2 one-time payments from the city of Lizardhead and the now dissolved Lizardhead Fire District, and fees collected from fire prevention services such as plan review and inspections. The overall total expenditures for 2019 are budgeted at $6,068,049. This includes costs related to personnel services, overtime, administrative services, non-personnel operations, supplies, and services, and transfers out to a capital fund, debt services fund, ambulance fund, and revenue stabilization. This evening, we provided a summary of revenue and expenditures. There's much more detail in your board letter and in the budget document. So first, let's look at revenue. And you also asked for not only this year's budget, but 5-year forecasts. So we've included, to the best of our ability, a forecast of 5 years, projecting modest growth of 2%. So this year's budget for revenue, we're looking at $6,689,000, roughly. Going forward, that decreases substantially due to the lack of one-time payments from the city of Lizardhead and the old Lizardhead Fire Protection District. So we will have to supplement or augment our budget going forward, where we normally see growth because we do not have those one-time payments going forward. We'll make some modifications in the budget to support that. Expenditures for 2019 total estimated just over $6 million. Personnel services represents the largest expense category of this general fund, includes wages and benefits packages, including overtime, for all fire suppression personnel and administration. This does not include personal wages, benefits, or overtime for personnel assigned to the ambulance. We've broken that out, and we'll present that a little bit further down the line in this presentation. These costs are accounted for in the ambulance fund. Administrative expenditures. These expenditures represent the costs associated with administrative services provided by the City of Lizardhead under the mutually agreed upon city administrative IGA, basically human resources, equipment repair, facility maintenance services, as well as other pertinent administrative services. A breakdown of these costs are shown in Appendix A in the budget document. Basically, there's efficiencies gained if those services are provided to our district by existing organizations. So we pay for those services. Operations, supplies, and services. These costs reflect the operational supplies and services necessary to carry out the functions of providing the fire and emergency services. This includes the equipment and maintenance replacement and maintenance costs, facility costs and supplies, IT services, clothing and uniforms, food, fuel, etc. The fund projection for these services and supplies reflect an increase of 3% for the services under contract, with all their lines increasing 2% based on inflation. A breakdown of these costs are presented in Appendix A, summary of non-personnel and administrative operations expenditures in your budget document. Other transfers out represent the amount of general fund dollars that are transferred to other government funds within the budget, include capital fund, debt servicing, ambulance, and revenue stabilization. And then reserves, we've included reserves as established by the board of directors with basically an operating reserve within 15% of the current year's operating expenses to include personnel and non-personnel operating expenditures. That's the difference you see in the revenue and expenditures. We've accounted for about 15% to go into our reserves. So now that we've discussed our district revenue and expenditures, I'd like to spend a moment talking about, in a general sense, first, our employees and the number of employees we have and where they work and their costs. And then I'll break it down into both administration and operations, basically. The folks that are the boots on the ground and provide the operational job functions, and then those that are tasked with administering that function of the fire department. So in total, your board has authorized a total of 46.5 FTEs. However, 2 positions currently remain vacant. So right now we are at 44.5 positions. The operations section includes 39 FTEs, which actually meets and exceeds minimum staffing for fire suppression and ambulance operations. So we're looking really good there. In addition, 5.5 FTE positions are assigned to the administrative section. Now, a little bit about why there's this discrepancy in the 2 numbers. The board, your board, authorized the creation of a second assistant chief position responsible for the admin duties of the district. Previously, 1 company officer was moved up to fill this position while that was vacant. The second administrative chief will be responsible for fire suppression operations. And in addition to that, there'll be 1 administrative assistant position that will be filled as well. The fire district also has met the required 9 paramedic positions for paramedic ambulance transport. And all personnel who maintain paramedic certification will receive paramedic incentive pay, equivalent to 10% of their base pay. All employees will remain in their previous salaries in 2019. The percentage of direct benefit costs as a function of salary will remain at 25% as per your mandate. A 3% merit increase in salary for all employees, with the exception of the fire chief, will be factored into projected personnel expenditures for fiscal years 2020 and 2022. And we've called that out in a slide that's coming a little bit later in the presentation. Merit increases occur on an average of every 2 years. The last salary increase was in 2018. Fire chief will receive a COLA increase of 2% in fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2022. Here we've broken out our personnel assigned to administration, basically fire chief, an assistant chief, a fire marshal, and 1.5 administrative assistants. The total cost to provide those services, approximately $458,000 annually. Operations, 1 assistant chief, 9 company officers, 6 engineers, 6 firefighter medics, 3 engineer medics, and 15 firefighters, a total of 40 positions. Salary, $2.2 million. Benefits, a little over $550,000 for a total cost of approximately $2.8 million. And next on this slide, again, we just break out for your board the difference between administration costs and operational costs. Administrative salary costs, $458,864. Operations, $2,831,811 for a total in salary benefits costs for our employees for 44.5 FTEs is $3,290,675. 2 more areas of the budget we wanted to call out this evening. First is the operations budget, which is the non-personnel part of it. Basically, how much does it cost besides salaries and benefits for our people to run the fire department? So first will be operations, and the next we'll talk about the ambulance budget. But first, the non-personnel operations budget. First column there is the 2019 budget, what we've requested out of revenue of $554,710. Supplies, $266,860. Services, $278,850. And as we discussed, supplies and services are things like paper and utilities and fuel and maintenance costs. Basically, all of the things that go into keeping the lights in the fire station on, that keep the water running, that keep the engines rolling, those sorts of things. Basically, anything that we provide, supplies for hose and tools and those sorts of things. Anything that costs for the fire department that do not include personnel costs. So for 2019, a total of $545,710, and we've included inflation at 2% year over year going forward from 2020 through 2023. Next part of the budget we wanted to call out is the ambulance budget. Personnel costs for the ambulance budget, remember, it's staffed with one paramedic firefighter and one EMT firefighter. So staffing costs for that personnel part of it is $453,130. We've teased out the administrative costs for that, about $29,000 a year, and operating costs, basically, again, non-personnel costs, things like medical supplies, fuel, maintenance of equipment, $39,914. So direct costs to provide ambulance services, $522,167, which also happens to be the exact amount of money we will collect in ambulance revenue. So the good news for the CLCFD is that providing ambulance service is not only a wonderful way to serve the community, it's done in a cost-neutral fashion to the taxpayer. So we're really proud of this program. Going forward, you'll see anticipated increase to personnel costs, and then and then operating costs increase based on inflation going forward. Okay, so before we get into performance measures and the rest of our presentation, we presented revenue, expenditures, personnel, number of personnel positions, FTEs, and the costs associated not only with the personnel that work for the district, but the cost to provide operations and cost to provide the ambulance service. So before we transition from a very fiscally focused discussion into performance measures and providing service, I wanted to stop and ask for if there was any questions that the board might have at this time related to the finances of the district. Okay, seeing none, let's move into performance measures. So internally, we've identified some performance measures that are basically goals, right? So they're measurable, attainable, realistic performance measures that we believe internally are going to benefit the community. And if we're achieving these performance measures, we're not only providing a high quality of service, but doing so at great value to the taxpayers. So we've got three different areas, the first of which is fire training. CLCFD personnel will be required to individually complete 240 hours total annually of company training. The ongoing and constantly evolving fire service is complicated, technical, and requires a lot of remedial and ongoing and new training. The way we do business today is vastly different, and the challenges we face today are vastly different than when I started in the fire service almost 25 years ago. So one of the things that we want to ensure is that we're providing the latest and greatest, that we're providing the highest level, the most skilled fire protection and technical rescue services that we can. So not only will our personnel have to participate in 240 hours of training annually, 16 of those will have to be conducted at our state-of-the-art training facility, where there will be intensive one-on-one training with instructors. They'll have access to live fire simulations and access to auto extrication, technical rescue scenarios. So we feel these two performance measures in the area of fire training will help maintain the skills required to provide a high level of service to the community. This training program that will be developed enables every individual to maintain the appropriate credentialing in their position, and we feel they're very valid performance measures that we're going to look to maintain and constantly evaluate. Next up is fire services, and the community demands, let me back up, when they call 911, they want their problems solved quickly and competently by professional first responders. And part of that is getting to them quickly, getting to the individual or the scene of the emergency quickly. So one of the things we've identified as a performance measure for this budget cycle is for 90% of all emergency incidents, the first due or the closest fire engine or ambulance, staffed with at least 2 firefighters and 1 company officer, shall arrive within 4 minutes of going en route to the incident and being capable of advancing a first line for fire control or starting rescue when a life hazard is present. Time is tissue, meaning that in the event of a medical emergency, a heart attack or stroke, we need to get there quickly. And if we're going to have any chance at improving outcomes of these patients, we need to get there and get ALS going quickly. The same is true with a fire. Modern building construction means that when structures burn, because the inside, the couches are made of materials that are essentially petroleum products, and the trusses are glued together, we have very limited time to get in, suppress a fire, and save lives. So we feel it's extremely important that one of our performance measures is to get to scene quickly and safely, have hose lines extended quickly, or have AED or CPR in progress in less than 4 minutes. And that's one of our performance measures. Our second performance measure follows up on that. For 90% of all emergency incidents, the second due unit, staffed with at least 2 firefighters and 1 officer, shall arrive within 8 minutes of going en route to the incident and provide an uninterrupted water supply of at least 400 gallons of water per minute. This is the support, essentially. We can get there quickly, start our emergency mitigation quickly, but we do need support. We need the cavalry to show up to help supplement that effort. So our second performance measure is that our second in-engine company will be there within 8 minutes. We've added a complicating or an additional step to that. It's not just good enough to be there, you got to go to work. So our first due engine company will be there within 4 minutes. We'll have hose lines pulled inside fighting fire. Our second performance measure is our second in-engine company will be there within 8 minutes and be delivering 400 gallons of water uninterrupted to that structure fire. We feel these performance measures are difficult, but they're attainable, especially coupled with our training performance measures, where our personnel will be doing 240 hours of ongoing training annually plus 16 at the tower. Combine these 2 sets of performance measures, and you're looking at a highly efficient fire protection district that's delivering a high level of service. And ultimately, the goal is to preserve life and property by doing so. And our last set of performance measures, or our last performance measure is in the area of fire prevention. And it's better for our community if buildings don't burn. And if we can go out and prevent fires from happening in the first place, that's the best case scenario. We don't want to have to come put a fire out in your business. And so what we want to do is we want to provide business inspection services. So for all commercial occupancies within the jurisdiction, we want to help prevent fires. And so for all commercial occupancies in this jurisdiction, our performance measure for 2019 will be to provide fire inspections annually. And we're not just going to do it for commercial occupancies. We want to do it for multifamily residences as well. The fire code gives us the authority that's been adopted to inspect not only commercial occupancies that are conducting business, but multifamily residents as well, to make sure things like fire extinguishers are up to date, to make sure access is adequate for fire, police, and emergency response, to ensure there's not an accumulation of fire hazard, to ensure hazardous materials are stored in a proper fashion, to ensure that if they're processing things like petroleum, that it's stored and processed in a fashion that is safe to do so. We want to prevent fires. And our fifth performance measure here in our third category of fire prevention is a good way to do it. So, performance measures for 2019, just to recap, we're going to help prevent fire by inspecting all commercial and multifamily occupancies. We're going to arrive at a fire or emergency within 4 minutes and be to work in less than 4 minutes. The second in company will be there within 8 minutes going to work as well. And then to help support those things, training. Each member of the district will participate in 240 hours of training, 16 of which to be at the training tower. We're really excited about these performance measures. We feel they're going to provide a great level of service to Central Liberty County. So looking forward to the 2020 budget process, we recommend a similar process by which we went through the 2019 process. Things were a little different this year because we're consolidating fire districts. So there were some additional meetings and plans, and we had to kind of develop a lot of these things through good research and collaboration with our partners at the cities and at the county level. But what about 2020? What about next year? If you refer back to our flow chart, we'd like to continue this. If our budget is adopted, next steps are to spend money, be fiscally accountable for spending that money, implement the objectives and goals, deliver high-quality emergency services, and then about 6 months before the budget needs to be approved again, we'll ask our managers for input. We'll start this process over again. We'll have the deputy chief look at it. We'll have our financial analysts look at it. We'll work with the cities to make sure we're all on the same page so that when we come before you in 2019, you're confident that a solid process has been undertaken to develop a budget document and that it can be adopted quickly and with confidence. So we recommend the same process we went through this year for the 2020 process. Part of your requests for us was to look at the next 5 years and forecast out some items that might be headwinds or might cause some friction or could impact the budget over the next few years. So we've identified 3 different things, or 3 different categories that we feel might be an issue coming forward over the next 3 or so years. So first is capital improvements. As most agencies, we've got some infrastructure that needs some help, some support, some maintenance, and some overhaul. So in addition to what we've budgeted this year and then going forward over the next few years, we will have to look at capital improvement, developing and implementing a maintenance plan going forward. So I wanted to take you through 4 facilities that we feel need addressed over the next 5 years. The first is Fire Station number 1. It's the former Downtown City Fire Station. It needs an updated fire sprinkler system. It needs replacement of a deteriorating north ramp with heating system. It needs a remodel of the office area to include additional administrative offices at Fire Station 1. Fire Station number 2, which is a former Northwest District Station, needs a new exercise room. And part of our health and safety initiative is to provide vehicle exhaust systems in our fire stations so our personnel aren't breathing in diesel fumes. So Station 2 needs a vehicle exhaust ventilation system. Station 3, it's the former Northeast District Station. Overflow parking area needs to be paved to meet city code, and it needs landscaping to meet city code. And then finally, the training facility. I mentioned it's a state-of-the-art training facility earlier. We want to maintain that level of excellence and make it a training facility that all of our cooperating agencies want to come and train at. So over the next 5 years or 5 years down the line, potentially we're looking at remodeling the classrooms in there, the exercise room and the offices. We'd like to look at the idea of converting that to an emergency operations center or EOC for the city. It needs a fire sprinkler system, vehicle exhaust system, emergency generator. We believe there's asbestos in that facility that requires removal during a remodel. We'd like to improve the energy efficiency, replace the HVAC, and update landscaping to meet city code at the training facility. So those are the capital improvements, first category of headwinds or possible impacts to the budget going forward over the next 5 years. Our second headwind over the next 5 years or impact to the budget is equipment. So equipment has to be replaced over time. The recommended shelf life on a first due fire engine is 15 years. 15 years frontline status, 10 years reserve status, and then after that we donate engines to community colleges or find other areas for them to be of service. So ideally for our fire protection district, our frontline engines will be in service for 15 years. They'll be placed in reserve status for 10 years, and then the district can decide what to do with them after that. So our three, we mentioned before, we have 11 engines in service in the district. The three frontline engines, stations 1, 2, and 3, are 2009, 2007, and 2002. So we've got 3 engines in frontline status, 2 of which are still within their first 15 years of life. The third is currently in year 16. So candidly, it's not critical now. 15 years is a good goal and it's a good guideline. But we are there. We're in year 16 of service for our engine at Station 3. It was put into service in 2002, so we're in year 16. So while not immediate, over the next 5 years, our district will be putting together a capital equipment plan to address replacing these fire engines and putting them back into service. Fire engines are not cheap, and they will be a significant impact to the budget. So more discussion to come with those. So 2 areas of some certainty: capital improvement and capital equipment. And then now we'll look at the third area, which is economic uncertainty and personnel costs. We've seen over the last month the stock market come down considerably, and all stock market gains erased for 2018. What that looks like for our pension fund and our obligation or our retirement costs going forward, that impact is to be determined. We do have MOUs in place that outline personnel salary increase in costs, but their MOU is up for negotiation soon, so those costs could increase. So those headwinds are just sort of the variables that are out there that we don't know, and they could be have potential impact to the fire district. So basically economic uncertainty and varying personnel costs. The good news is that we're fully staffed. We're providing adequate service. And so personnel expansion right now does not look like it needs to be in the cards, because I feel that we're providing an excellent service to the community. Once we opt to expand that, going down the line, we will need to expand as the community grows. But that's that will be down the line a little bit. So like I said, our 3 areas of potential headwinds to the budget or impacts to the budget going forward over the next 5 years. Capital improvements, basically maintenance at the 3 fire stations and the training facility. Capital equipment costs, replacing or coming up with a plan to replace our 3 frontline fire engines. And then finally, economic uncertainty going forward. We always need to maintain reserve funds and be cognizant of what's going on around us and the fact that we may have additional retirement system costs or pension costs for our personnel. And our last slide here this evening before we open it up for questions from your board is there were 12 areas that in your budget retreat you asked us to address in this year's budget document. And I feel like we've hit those. If we haven't, please ask questions. But I wanted to quickly review the 12 items that you wanted us to address. First is operating reserve. We addressed that by providing 15% of our operating costs into a reserve fund. This year it's a little over $600,000 we're putting into our reserves. We've developed finance and budget policies that are included in your packet, in your document. We've identified and taken you through the process by which we arrived at our 2019 budget, included that in your documentation. Including in this presentation and your documentation is a 5-year budget projection. We've talked about the ambulance service and talked about how it's an amazing service that provides an incredible value to the community by being cost neutral. We've talked about our capital program and our capital needs going forward. What we've not talked about tonight is no tax increase for 5 years, but you'll see in our budget that we've not asked for that. We've not anticipated that. We've not included that in any of our conversations. So We're not looking to do any tax increases for 5 years. We have included an assessed value increase for property taxes in our budget projections. We've identified 5 performance objectives in the areas of fire training, fire operations, and fire prevention. Total of 5 in those 3 categories. We've identified and kind of talked about fire stations and staffing for 2019. We've talked about the 2019 compensation increase. And with that, we respectfully submit to you our budget document for 2019.